Hello, everyone. Welcome to this exciting author-led session. It's a special book launch session featuring Dr. Sue Roffey. Dr. Sue Roffey is an acclaimed author as well as an education leader. So let me formally introduce Dr. Roffey. She's a psychologist, she's an academic, she is a renowned speaker and author on student and school well-being initiatives and interventions. She's currently an honorary associate professor at the University College of London and the Western Sydney Universities, and she's the director of Growing Great Schools Worldwide, a movement to transform schools to be empathetic, compassionate, mindful, and critically aware, using the Aspire framework that Dr. Sue Roffey developed. She's also developed pedagogy for social and emotional learning uh, in an attempt to contribute and shape towards a more safe, uh, a strengths-focused, solutions-focused space for students and teachers. So, without further ado, I would like to yield the floor to Dr. Roffey to present her book. So thank you so much for joining in, Dr. Roffey. It's a pleasure to have you at uh, Global Citizenship Foundation as well as the conference every time. So it's a delight to host you. So the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Ariane. It's an absolute privilege and pleasure to be here. And thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak to such a wide audience. I'm just going to put my share my screen with you now. Here we go. Here we go. Now, these are the books that I'm going to be talking about today, and they were both published earlier this year. The one for early years and primary in June, and the one for secondary settings in August. And as you can see, ASPIRE is an acronym for agency, safety, positivity, inclusion, respect, and equity. And I'm going to be talking briefly about what all of those principles means and why they're important, and illustrate some of it by very brief video clips. And we'll also be thinking about how those principles based in positive psychology apply in your setting. Now, the principles aren't just something that have just arrived on my desk in the last little while. They have taken over 20 years to develop and establish, and they are aligned with what we need promotes healthy child development, what every child needs to thrive and learn, and how students stay motivated and engaged in schooling. And we know that since COVID in particular, there's been a big issue around attendance in schools and engagement with learning. They're also the principles that apply to positive relationships. In 2012, I edited a book called Positive Relationships Across the World. And many of the things that were said in that book, it was 17 different chapters about different sorts of relationships, but they had so much in common, and what they have in common is the ASPIRE principles. It's also based in decades of research in positive psychology and also the research on well-being in education. So I'm just going to be talking about the headlines. So I really hope that some of you will actually go and actually find the book yourself, talking about what it means in practice and what happens when those principles are not in place. So I'd just like to have a think for a moment, just a little bit of a reflection. Just think about what are the three most important things in your life. What are the three most important things in your life? And I expect a lot of you are going to be thinking about the importance of relationships, the importance of being mentally and physically well, be thinking about your own kids and ones you teach and the ones that perhaps are in your family. And then I'd like you to think about, what do we spend the most time and effort on in schools? And this isn't true of all schools, but it's certainly true of many education systems, that what we think about is getting through exams and spending time on things that don't necessarily have huge relevance to the quality of our lives. So what do our children and young people need in school while they're there in school? Now, more than anything else for me, they should be enjoying learning and engaged in being curious about the world around them. It's very hard to stay motivated if you don't see yourself making a bit of progress in actually developing understanding and some of the parameters of the things on the curriculum. We know that well-being underpins good mental health. It's not an either or. It's learning and mental health together. It's important kids feel they belong. They certainly need to feel safe, and not all of them do. They need to know about what it means to establish and maintain really strong relationships. They need to be creative, critical thinkers, and have a sense of meaning and purpose in their lives. And what we have seen for much of the 21st century is, since COVID, is that we've had problems with learner engagement. In one of the books, I've talked about a Facebook page which is called Not Fine in School. And there are tens of thousands of people who have signed up to that Facebook page in the UK, because families and children are not engaged with school. It's not somewhere that they feel is full of the joys of learning and feeling engaged and connected. We also have a lot of the places we have one size fits all. It doesn't work. And we know that particularly as children go through school, those people for whom the curriculum isn't totally relevant are quite bored. And when they're bored, they switch off. And what we have is competitive environments. In 2022, a paper was published here called Bringing Out the Best. And what they said in that paper, it was a Times Education Commission report, said that about a third of our young people feel that they're failures, because in a competitive environment, only some people can see themselves succeeding. And in fact, nobody should fail in education. Everybody should be able to succeed and develop their own strengths and their own understanding. And when we have competitive environments, that's not going to happen. That needs to change, because we miss out so much of the potential of the next generation. Everyone talks in the UK at the moment, and I think it's probably true everywhere, that we need good quality buildings and resources, but actually all of the Aspire principles only really need the belief that these things matter in education and the will to enact it. And for the 21st century, because so much knowledge is available to young people, not just in books in libraries now, but in the whole of the World Wide Web and the internet, that teachers need to be able to facilitate that learning. It's critically important that they are there, because they are not necessarily the fount of all knowledge, but they are really critical as facilitators of learning. Now, I'm going to show you, I hope it works here. I really hope it works here. I want to show you my two grandchildren, a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. And in a very, very brief video, I want to show you how so many of the Aspire principles are in place. They've both chosen to engage in the activity. The little girl makes a mistake and no one corrects her or berates her. They're playing and having fun together. They're doing something together, And at the end of this, the little girl says something positive to her brother. And that sort of activity is open to all. Now, I'm just hoping that we can show this. Here we go. I hope that you could see just how important all of those principles are in that tiny little clip. A lot of the time, it's not the big policy documents that matter as much as the little practical changes in what we do and what we say, how we do it, and what is said. So I'm going to talk first of all about agency. Children are not empty vessels. As you can see from that little video clip, they have ideas of their own. They want to make a difference in the world. They are incredibly curious from a very young age. And what really bothers me is that agency needs to continue from those early years when children are tiny, right the way through school, that kids actually really have self-determination as much as we can make that happen. We need to foster intrinsic motivation, not just tell kids they need to get through a curriculum, but build on their interests, their strengths and their passions. And there are many, many ways to promote fascination to hook children into learning. One of the things that's happening in some schools is flipped learning, where children are asked to, or students are asked to look at a particular subject matter, look at it on the internet, find out about it as much as they can, and then when they go to school the next day, the teacher is there to answer their questions and help them look at ways to apply that learning and to enable them to be critical thinkers. We need a curriculum that promotes that critical thinking so that students can apply that learning with integrity, with a set of positive values. So both teachers and learners need choice, they need to have a voice, and they need to have some shared decision making. And a lot of my work, a lot of the books that I've written in the past have been about behaviour. And behaviour is not about children just doing as they're told. It's about them choosing pro-social behaviour, behaviour that enables them to actually be part and a positive part of their community. And that means that rewards and sanctions don't work over the longer term. So what happens when students don't have agency? Well, it undermines their sense of competence because they're not being asked to use their own strengths. It reduces their responsibility. So when they believe that decisions are always made by other people, they can actually blame other people when things go wrong. It means that they don't take their own responsibility. And when they're not heard and their voice doesn't matter and their strengths aren't engaged, they may switch off and stop making effort. At times, it can just make people passive. So what we want is really active citizens in the future, people who are going to make a difference in their communities. And if you feel that you haven't got a voice and you don't have choices, you may not develop those values that enable you to actually want to be positive, active citizens. We need to make sure that children learn healthy relationships. And if we don't give children agency, they either become passive or when they are grown up, they tend to want to control others, which is problematic in our society. This is another little example of children in schools taking agency, and this is a Palestinian school. Let me just see if I get this. There we go. So as you can see in that little video, those little children were choosing how they want to be greeted in the morning. It's a very, very small thing for the teacher to be doing, but look at how the children are responding. They are actually making those choices and then enacting those choices out with their teacher. Really nice to see. In my Circle Solutions social and emotional learning, agency is there by students being given activities and games and all sorts of discussions to actually come to their own understanding of the way they want to be in the world and the values that they develop. They're not told what to do. They're not told what to think. They're given opportunities to develop their own understanding. It's really important throughout childhood, but it's particularly important in adolescence when teenagers are developing their identity. They don't want to be told who they are going to be. So for you, in what ways do your schools give students and staff a voice and choice? Do people talk about teacher control, and what does that mean? Does that take away student agency? What happens more often in your teaching? Telling students or asking them, getting them to think things through? Sometimes children need to take a lead in their learning. And of course, it's important for teachers as well. The teachers themselves also have a say in what's going on in their schools. Just have a think about that for a minute. Safety is physical, social, emotional, and these days very much digital. So what does this mean in the school? It's very difficult to feel safe if you are not accepted for who you are, where you come from, maybe your sexual orientation, maybe your background, maybe your family. Really important that we accept everyone for who they are. It's very important in schools that we have making mistakes as part of learning, because what happens when that doesn't exist in a school is that young people try and be perfect. And because they compare themselves with others on social media a lot of the time, they constantly feel that they're not good enough, and that does not help with their mental health. They need to be able to make mistakes and know that's part of learning. You need to be able to trust that other people will have your best interests at heart and not be singled out, particularly if that's going to be embarrassing or you're going to feel you're put on the spot. We know that bullying is rife in many, many schools, and it's really important that we don't just say it's the fault of the bully or that it's the fault of the person who's bullied, but actually ensuring that something happens in school to make sure that everybody ensures that the environment people are learning is safe from bullying, safe from intimidation, safe from harm. There are some students who hardly ever feel safe, and that's partly to do with what's happening maybe in their environment, in their family, in their community, with other people. But it's worth saying here, and I want to say it loud and clear, that many schools are places that are secure, reliable, predictable, inclusive, and kind. And although teachers often get accolades for getting high test scores, they don't often get thanked for turning children's lives around. And teachers do this all the time, and it needs to be valued so much more than it already is. We know that young people who've experienced difficulties in their lives might see threat everywhere, and their behaviour can reflect this. So our behaviour policies, as I've already said, need to be proactive and relational, not throw punishment at kids who are already feeling very bad about what's happened to them in the world. So how do we build safety in schools? We have activities that help students get to know each other. And if they get to know each other, they will also be developing, hopefully, some empathy and understanding. We need people to know what to do when they see somebody being hurt, and that's possible to do. We need to accept and value imperfection. And I absolutely love those words like becoming and yet. One of the things that you might like to see in the primary and early years book is a couple of pages about a school's safe touch policy, because lots of kids actually need to know that they can come for physical comfort sometimes, and sometimes it's important that we have to touch children to stop them perhaps getting into some physical difficulties with others. So safe touch policies are really important. The thing that I'm most proud of in the books is the number of people from across the world who've written little case studies and vignettes about how they are putting these principles into practice in their own settings. We've got something in the secondary book about growing good men, the importance of role models and challenging those stereotypes of real men and what it means. The issues about knives in schools, a whole raft of things about what needs to happen to actually stop some of the physical danger that many children think they're in, and the importance of consent education for young people who are actually going to get engaged in romantic friendships with people, and what it means to ensure that whatever's going to happen in a sexual encounter, there is consent. In primary safety, alongside talking about the safe touch policy, we've also talked about digital safety, the mighty heroes that showcase Australian animals that represent different superpowers, promoting online safety, and aligning all this with learning to take risks as part of healthy child development. In the social and emotional learning, to make sure everybody feels safe there, we never talk about incidents so that people aren't put in a situation where they might need to disclose something, but it's always about issues, talking about kindness, talking about inclusion, talking about upstanding, not actually talking about something that happened in the playground. No one is asked to disclose personal information, so we talk using the impersonal. Rather than talking about I in a situation, we talk about someone, or maybe we. And if somebody doesn't feel comfortable, they don't have to speak at all for as long as they want. And what tends to happen is that they choose eventually to speak when they have something to say and they feel comfortable about saying it. There's no individual competition in circle solutions. No one is ever singled out. It happens, activities happen in pairs, small groups, or the whole circles. So in groups of 4 or 5, so everyone contributes, students are asked to design a safe and friendly school for everyone. And they're asked to think about, what would you hear? What would you see? What would people be feeling? All those designs go on the wall, and in the next circle, students discuss what they have in common, and then they talk about how they're going to put this into practice. So that's the A and the S in Aspire. And now we're on to positivity. Some young people don't feel good about themselves, other people of the world around them. And we know that negative feelings impact negatively on learning. It makes sense to promote the positive. Positive words, positive feelings, and positive actions. Words are very powerful. What we say to other people help creates their self-concept, how they think about themselves and who they are. So rather than saying and throwing out words like lazy or selfish, we need to give students words to live up to. You are becoming such a thoughtful person. I love your energy. And then you need to channel that energy. How we speak to others matters, not just the words, but the tone and volume. And if you shout at kids, they don't hear what you say, they hear the volume. What we say about other people's influences how those people are perceived. Conversations in the classroom and conversations in the staff room really matter about that. And what we choose to say when can change culture. It can change the emotional climate of a school and what people believe. These are strengths cards, and I use these a lot in social emotional learning. So young people choose and pick up resources that they are developing, resources, strengths that they have, strengths that they might need in a particular situation. That little boy in the picture you can see there has clearly been told things about himself, used language used towards him, in which it's really impacted on how he sees himself, his learning, his potential, and who he's becoming in the future. So important. Positive actions include values in action. And I don't have time to go through all of these, but there are so many in the book. Smiling is one of the first things that a baby learns to do. Most babies start smiling about 6 weeks old, and it is so rewarding to parents when that happens. And I think that sometimes we need to be thinking about the value of silence, that if somebody's done something that maybe wasn't very sensible, telling them is unnecessary because they already knew that. We need to be not thinking about problems so much as having a vision of the possible and the solutions towards that. And we know that actually looking on the bright side, actually thinking about what we have rather than bemoaning what we don't have, promotes both resilience and well-being. And acknowledging what others do builds community. We did it in lockdown. In the UK, we clapped for carers and key workers, and that built a sense of community. Positivity includes play. It is incredibly important that young people have the opportunity for free play. And what we do know, that the research says that the reduction of free play is actually aligned with the reduction of mental health. Really important. Having fun together promotes positive connection between each other. Positive feelings build social capital. If you feel valued, you're going to be more cooperative with those people who value you. If you feel cared for, you're more likely to have compassion for others. Those people who respect you, you're much more likely to listen to them. If you are included by a group of people, you will have so much more commitment and motivation to that group. We know that when you have a sense of fun, you are going to have some of your stress reduced, because it promotes that oxytocin, that feel good sense of belonging. And when you have a sense of belonging, you are going to be more resilient against the things that are difficult and challenging. And generally speaking, when you feel good about yourself and you're not full of negative emotions, you are much more likely to be able to be both creative and be able to problem solve. This is just one example of school I worked in Australia, where the girls in the Aboriginal Girls Circle thought that it would be good to share their views about positivity, and they developed positive pathways with lots of different ideas in those positive pathways. That they did this in the school grounds. In Circle Solutions, you are only allowed to say positive things to other people. You don't put people down. We talk about what we want, not what we want to get rid of. And we identify strengths for ourselves, others, and situations. And every circle that we run has some shared fun in it. And one of the things people say about how much they like Circle Solutions is because they have fun. Hold on a minute. I hope I can go forward here. So some reflections here, some reflections. In your school, is there an awareness of the words to create culture? Do people use the language of strengths and solutions? Do people talk about problems all the time rather than saying, what's the vision of our school? How can we get to the vision? What's the next step? And in what ways is your school playful? Do people have fun together? We are born to connect with each other. And feeling you belong is one of the strongest factors for well-being. David Putnam talks about this as being like bridging social capital. And he says it's like WD-40. It oils the wheels between people. It accepts that we're all wonderfully unique and different and promotes equality and builds our shared humanity. Exclusive belonging is much more problematic. The people who are in an exclusive group are bound together like superglue, but they actually maintain a sense of superiority by keeping others out who don't fit, who are different. And one of the things that is problematic about that is that it can promote racism, homophobia, misogyny, a lot of things that we don't want in a healthy society. And it has the potential to dehumanize others. So inclusivity really matters in schools. It means being valued for accepted for who you are, making progress, so learning has meaning. And Prilatensky, who is a wonderful academic in Miami in the US, has written a lot about mattering. And he says that it's not just about being valued, but also having opportunities to add value. And look how important that is for global citizenship, being able to participate and having your role appreciated. And school belonging applies to everyone in a school, not just the students, but the staff and families and the community. And we know that feeling rejected can be very powerful. Social rejection activates the same brain as involved in physical pain. And one of the things that we know that in a study in 2003, when Leary analysed 15 cases of school shooters in the US, found that all but 2 had experienced social rejection. We really need to be thinking about why acceptance and inclusion matters. In the books, I've got someone from Australia talking about the wonderful work that they do with an organisation called Together for Humanity. I've got an Israeli colleague who is trying to work with Palestinian students and Israeli students together. And we know that restorative practices enable people to reconnect with the communities where behaviour has damaged that connection. In a circle solution, social emotional learning, everybody's mixed up all the time. So they talk to people they wouldn't normally talk to. And activities include finding out about each other, finding what people have in common, and talking about safe topics. So how are all students valued in your schools? And what opportunities are they given to participate? What do people do and say that makes people feel they belong? And how can relationships with families also encourage a sense of belonging? Respect is the R in Aspire, and it's about for individuals, their context, their ideas. It's about not imposing one way of being. It means really listening to what people said, treating people with dignity, and enacting the golden rule, treating others as you would have them treat you. And the golden rule, Barack Obama talks about that in this book, The Audacity of Hope. And this is what he says. The golden rule is not simply a call to sympathy or charity, but something more demanding, a call to stand in someone else's shoes and see through their eyes. After all, if others are like us, then their struggles are our own struggles. And if we fail to help, we diminish ourselves. No one is exempt from the call to find common ground. And that leads us to respect. And in the books, we have examples of respect for teachers. One is about family first policy, so that if a teacher has a major issue going on at home, maybe illness or bereavement or separation or something that's really impacting on their competence in the classroom, people aren't told that it's a discipline issue. They take out their wellbeing policy and they say, what is going to help you recover from this? And the school who's doing this, St. Ebbs, and the head teacher of that school has written about this in the book. And she says that sometimes teachers require a bit of time off, sometimes with pay, sometimes without. Sometimes they need more planning time, but whatever it is, she says they all come back really willing to go above and beyond for students. We also know that some teachers are dealing with traumatized children in their classes, so they need the sort of supportive supervision that other workers get. Social workers or psychologists or psychiatrists get supervision, but teachers have these kids in their classes every day. They also need supervision. And there is a vignette there that talks about a PhD student giving the rationale for why this is important. And every day we need acknowledgement of everyday work well done. Respect is critical to the future of our society. We have the media as full of stories, so our children and young people need to be surrounded by models of respectful interactions from the moment they enter school until the day they leave. They need to know what it looks like and what it sounds like to be respectful to others. And we need to prioritize social and emotional learning on respectful relationships. So have you defined what respect means in your school and how it applies to everyone? How can we listen better? How can we have more respectful meetings? And in one of the books, there's a whole bit on how you make meetings more respectful. Now, equality is the E in Aspire, and this is equality. It's about everybody being given the same sorts of support. But in fact, that means that it doesn't meet individual needs at all. In this cartoon that you can see here, the little person there still can't see because she has the same size support as everybody else, but it doesn't help. This is actually what equity looks like. It's not treating everyone the same, but ensure that people have the resources to give them equal opportunities wherever possible. So treating everyone the same does not respect diversity or lead to what's fair. What we need is not a one-size-fits-all. And I just want to show you this little cartoon because it just made me smile, and I hope it does you too. I am dressed for success, but my idea of success may not be exactly the same as yours. And this, of course, fits in with everyone having their own strengths, and every one of our young people is wonderfully unique, and we should be celebrating and fostering that, not having everyone the same. Each learner has different strengths, experiences, and we need diversity. But we have mental health concerns when so many people see themselves as losers. We need much more personalised learning and different methods of assessment. So how do we put equity into action? We need to be flexible and fair so everyone can flourish. We need to have acceptance at the individual level, and we need at the policy level to account for those diverse needs and challenges. We need to make sure that the environment is accessible to everyone, but also thinking about what do we do at a societal level? Who gets the statues? Who has a voice? Who doesn't? In order to facilitate discussion, the impact on social justice, we need to start in education. What happens in education makes a whole difference to the societies we are building. This is where you can read more about the social and emotional learning that I'm doing, but we can also get more information in Growing Great Schools Worldwide, which is my organisation. And you can join up for free and get some newsletters from that. And those are the two little websites that actually give you access to aspire to wellbeing and learning for all in secondary settings, and then to early years and primary settings. Now, that is a quick rundown of 2 books and 6 principles, but I really hope that maybe some of you have got some comments and some questions that I might be able to answer in the last little while of this session. So some people are saying here some things that I just want to share, really. Learners engage when you know they care. And there's a great piece of research that took place in Australia that I've cited many times that says that students really like teachers who make learning fun when possible, but also show that they are interested in them as people, not just about the scores they are able to get, basically showing that they care. It says here that it takes time to get to know each student individually and show interest in their well-being. Now, in the Circle Solutions work that I do, equity is fostered by the teacher doing everything that the students do. So when they have paired discussions and they're finding out about each other, the teacher is also sitting next to one of the students and finding out about them. So that when they are needing to encourage them or they want to develop that relationship with them, they are able to do that by actually referring to something they might know about them, and particularly things that they might have in common, teams they might support, music they might like together, and have conversations about that. And somebody said the goal should be to give every learner the sense of I can. And this is one of the reasons I love that word yet. Maybe just saying, I can't yet, but I'm on the way. And that also gives our young people a sense of hope and a destiny for their future. Now, is there any more? Inclusivity is more about collecting everyone to work with their strengths. Yes, I love that. There's so many good comments in here. There is considerable evidence that playing helps support children's cognitive development. This includes the development of language skills, problem solving, gaining perspective, presentational skills, memory, and creativity. That is so true. Playing. I worked with adolescent Aboriginal girls in Australia many, many times over several years. And one of the things that they have said a lot about the work that we did together is they loved it because it was fun and that they played together. And when they were given the option of doing things, having some agency in what we did, they chose to play the games together. And that is young teenagers. It's not just little children, it's all ages. Okay, is there any more here? Let me see some latest messages. Yeah. I do hope that people have the opportunity to go and look for the books and particularly to read the vignettes and the case studies. The book, every single chapter is absolutely full of that. I start off by saying, what does this principle mean? And then why is it important? And all of them are aligned with the Convention on the Rights of the Child. So it's really important that they're there, but also it's full of ideas about how you put this into practice. Yeah. Let me see if there's anything more here. Barriers, fences can be removed for equity. One of the things that happened when I showed these little cartoons about equality and equity, and I showed them to my friend and colleague, she said the big problem there is the fence. So removing fences actually really matters. So thank you very much, Coach, you there. Oh, no, it was, yes, Chandrika. Thank you very much for that. Does anybody else have any questions, maybe? There are some questions. The Q&A section. Oh, where do I find that? Q&A? Right, thank you. How can we prioritize mental health while teaching? One of the things that's really important to remember is that mental health and well-being is not an either or with your teaching. And prioritizing mental health is actually very much around the words that come out of your mouth, actually sort of giving children encouragement that they're getting there, making sure that they know that you will be there to listen to them at times if they have something they want to share, or you'll be able to show them to routes and avenues to support. But actually, the biggest thing is that we need to help our kids feel better about themselves, have using the words of strength so that they start to see themselves differently really, really matters. The words we say, it doesn't have to be enormous things, just smiling at someone every day and saying you're pleased to see them is actually really important. And when they have behavior difficulties, actually not just immediately jumping to conclusions about what's going on, but also asking them good questions. What was going on there? What could you have done differently? How are we going to make this up to you now? And how are you going to make this up to so that you are a positive part of this class in the future? Do we have another question? What's the biggest challenge you face in integrating Aspire in classroom settings? That's an extremely good question. and I think I have a fairly straightforward answer to it, and that is about having the belief that it matters, that all of those principles matter. And what you sometimes get are teachers who believe that their role is around being a resource full of information, and that their job is to impart that information. So they teach subjects rather than students. And the first thing we need to do is to make sure that we teach students, that we respect the dignity and the humanity in every single person that we actually come across every day. And I've come across schools where I've been working in schools where the belief is not there. The belief that this matters is not there. So changing belief matters. And basically, when teachers are doing it and they can see that it does change things, then things start to move in the school culture. Another one, another question. Does it mean that it's crucial for teachers to work with each student's temperament? I think that actually acknowledging that some people are a little bit quieter, that sometimes people are a little bit noisier, that sometimes people need a little bit more reassurance. I think that that sort of thing really does make a difference. So you're actually checking in on that young person and who they are in the world. But it's also about enabling them to see themselves as positively as you can manage, because that makes a difference to their engagement and their learning overall. Another question, is there another one here? Let me have a look there. I'm still trying to find the questions here. Are there any more questions, or are there any more comments? Okay. Role of learning spaces, infrastructure changes in school for better social emotional learning and child safety. I mean, I think that's actually really interesting. I mean, I do think that children all sitting in lines doesn't help with interactions. I think we need, I always do all the work that I do in social emotional learning in a circle, because everybody is then engaged and participates, and it's very difficult to raise your eyebrows negatively and have nobody see it if you're all sitting there together. Child safety is actually really important to me. The reason that I put all these principles into place in social emotional learning is to maintain safety, because we know that some social emotional learning in the past wasn't a safe place for young people. They found themselves being asked to talk about incidents, they were asked to talk about negative emotions. So the stuff that I do is actually very much around positivity and inclusion and issues, not incidents. Really important that we do all that, and that teachers are also engaged in that. And I think that it also makes it a safe place for teachers as well, if you abide by the Aspire principles and everything that you're doing. Right, ownership. I've got a comment here. Ownership matters for every learner. Self-regulated learners evolve from owning the learning. And that's why, for me, we need to have, as much as possible, we need to have personalized learning and project-based learning wherever we can, because that maintains engagement, it maintains ownership of the learning and ownership of the understanding. And of course, learning is also really about it's a social event. Learning is often social, and it needs to be more so in many schools. How can teachers assist students who are unmotivated to learn? Well, one of the things I'd probably like to start off saying is that I don't think that any student is unmotivated to learn. Curiosity is actually embedded in us. What is the problem is that they're unmotivated to learn what you want to teach them. So one of the things that is valuable in engagement is that you try and link it in with something that is already of interest to the student. And working in groups on projects makes such a big difference. If you can learn about science and language and maths and all sorts of things by developing project-based learning. One of the things I once came across as an educational psychologist, which was in an earlier life, is a school where they had different projects every half term. So they had 6 basic projects a year for each year of the school. So one half term, the project for all of the students might be dinosaurs. And they did all of their history and their measurement and their learning about maths and science and geography, all sorts of things in the curriculum, just by hooking it onto something that was of interest to many of those children there. My family, films, there is so much you can do because that is much more engaging for young people. I once got involved with motivating a child to learn reading by basing it on the word tractor. And he started to learn that tractor begins with a T sound because his dad was working on a farm and he was very enthusiastic about anything to do with farms. And that was just one little hook that enabled that young person to begin to be more engaged. And of course, doing things together, talking about things together, making learning a social event also means that kids are going to be much more engaged. There are children missing out on school in droves in the UK and probably around the world because they are not wanting to go to school a lot of the time because they feel that either the learning is not for them and isn't anything to do with their life, or they feel that they are failing because they don't see themselves making progress, or they are being bullied and they don't feel safe in school. Somebody there, Rosanna Chatton Sparks, is saying PBL, project-based learning, autonomy, relevant and meaningful education is so important. I've seen firsthand how school refusers could become instantly re-engaged with education and thrive. And this is one of the reasons that I've written so much about the Aspire principles. Kids having agency, making choices, feeling safe in school, feeling that there's lots of positivity around and that they can have fun and joy in learning and curiosity, that they feel included, that they feel they belong, that they matter there, and that they are respected for their ideas and for who they are and for their individuality, and that things that are barriers are removed and people are flexible about kids' needs. I think we're almost to the end of this session. So can I just thank you all very much for your comments, for your questions, and I'm going to encourage you again to check out the books because they have got so much more in them than I have been able to speak about today. And thanks to all of those wonderful people who were willing to write their own stories and their own experiences. Thank you so much.
Am I audible?
You're inaudible now.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Roffey, for your inspiring presentation of the books. Really, really appreciate the amazing work that you've been doing in the field. We are very
Thank,
grateful and delighted to have you here. So thanks once again.
thank you very much for the opportunity, Arian, and thanks again for everything that you're doing as well. It's amazing. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye bye now.
Bye-bye.